What if I told you that some of the most famous people in the world were showing signs that something wasn't right, but no one fully understood them at the time? From the outside, everything looked completely normal. They were smiling in interviews, performing on stage, and continuing their careers like nothing had changed. But behind those moments, something was slowly getting worse, and the signs were there, just not in a way people recognized when it mattered most. When you go back and watch Chester Bennington in his later interviews, you can notice a shift that didn't feel important at the time. He was still speaking openly, still connecting with fans, but his tone had changed. There were moments where he paused longer than expected, moments where his expressions felt heavier, like he was carrying something deeper than what he was saying. He had spoken for years about depression, trauma, and addiction, but toward the end, those conversations felt more serious, even if people didn't realize it then. On July 20th, 2017, he was found dead at his home after dying by suicide, and only after that did people return to those interviews and understand that those small changes were never random. A similar pattern appeared in the life of Robin Williams, although his situation had an added layer that people didn't know at the time. Known for his energy and humor, he began to appear quieter in his later interviews, with slightly slower responses and moments where he seemed less present. Most people assumed it was simply age or fatigue, but behind the scenes, he was dealing with severe depression and a neurological condition later identified as Lewy body disease, which affects brain function and emotional control. In the weeks before his death, his condition worsened, making it harder for him to sleep and manage his thoughts. On August 11, 2014, he died by suicide, and only afterward did those subtle changes begin to make sense. The case of Avicii shows how sometimes the signs are actually spoken out loud, but still not fully understood. He talked openly about exhaustion, about the pressure of constant touring, and about needing to step away for his health. At the time, it sounded like something any artist might say after years of success, and people believed he was simply taking a break. But behind the scenes, the pressure continued, and the stress kept building. In April 2018, he was found dead while traveling, and his death was ruled a suicide. After that, people listened to those same interviews again and realized that what sounded normal before was actually much more serious. With Amy Winehouse, the situation was different because the signs were visible, but they were misunderstood. Her performances and public appearances showed clear changes, and it was obvious that she was struggling, but many people dismissed it as part of her personality or lifestyle. She had been dealing with addiction and personal challenges for a long time, but the full seriousness of her situation wasn't fully understood. On July 23, 2011, she died from alcohol poisoning, and only then did those visible moments become clear warning signs instead of just public behavior. In the case of Heath Ledger, the warning signs were much quieter and easier to overlook. During the time he was preparing for his role as the Joker, he spoke about struggling with severe insomnia and an overactive mind that made it difficult to sleep. At the time, this was seen as dedication to his craft, as if he was simply pushing himself to perform better. But behind that, he was relying on prescription medications to manage sleep and stress. On January 22, 2008, he was found dead in his apartment due to an accidental overdose caused by a combination of medications, and those earlier comments about sleepless nights suddenly took on a much more serious meaning. The story of Chris Cornell is one of the most difficult to understand because everything appeared completely normal right until the end. He performed a full concert, interacted with fans, and showed no obvious signs of distress. There were no visible warnings that night, nothing that made people think something was wrong. But just hours later, he was found dead in his hotel room, and his death was ruled a suicide. This left many people questioning whether the signs were there in earlier moments but simply not recognized at the time. With Mac Miller, the situation felt like it was improving, which made the outcome even more shocking. He had been open about his struggles with addiction, but in his later work, he appeared more self-aware and focused on growth. His music reflected change, and many fans believe he was moving forward in a better direction. However, on September 7, 2018, he was found dead at his home due to an accidental overdose, and once again, people went back to his interviews and lyrics, paying closer attention to things they hadn't fully understood before. The case of Whitney Houston shows how visible signs can still be ignored. In her later years, her public appearances, interviews, and performances clearly showed that something was different. People noticed the changes, but they were often dismissed or not taken seriously. Behind the scenes, she was dealing with substance-related struggles that gradually became more severe. On February 11, 2012, she was found dead in a hotel room, and her death was linked to drowning and substance use, turning those visible moments into clear signs in hindsight. In contrast, the story of Paul Walker shows that sometimes there are no signs at all. He was attending a charity event, interacting normally, and everything about the day felt completely routine. There was no unusual behavior, no indication that anything was wrong. But later that same day, he died in a sudden car accident, reminding people that not every tragedy comes with a warning. The same can be said for Kobe Bryant, whose life after retirement appeared stable and focused on family and future projects. There were no visible signs of anything being wrong, and everything seemed to be moving forward normally. But on January 26, 2020, a helicopter crash took his life along with his daughter, showing once again that some stories end without any warning at all. When you look at all of these stories together, a clear pattern begins to appear. In many cases, the signs were there, but they were small, quiet, and easy to ignore, and in other cases, there were no signs at all. At the time, everything feels normal, and no one expects the ending. But once everything is over, people go back and see things differently, noticing details that didn't seem important before. Because in the end, the truth is simple. The signs were not hidden. They were not invisible. They were just not understood when it mattered the most.